What's up guys, welcome to another video. It's been a very long time since my last one, but I wanted to showcase my DB10 team because quite a few people have been asking me about the team, so I wanted just to share it and I guess discuss the unit choices and stuff like that. So this will be a fairly long video, fair warning, but I'll try to structure it for you guys. So first off, I'll show a couple of runs and just talk about some general details about the run. Then I'll show the runes, and we'll talk about the unit choices, how the team works, like the turn order, etc. What it's aiming to do to speed up the run. And then we'll talk about some of the alternative units for people who don't have multiple Talias like I do, and finally I'll talk about why I feel Shiner is a bit overrated for DB10 and why she won't necessarily speed up your run unlike Talia's. So yeah, we'll discuss that a little bit later, but first off, just some small details about the run. The fastest run that I've had with this team is 28 seconds, which you probably just saw on the victory screen. That is the fastest run, but keep in mind it's not consistent. Obviously, it's very rare to get your fastest time multiple times, consistently. But I can usually get fairly low. But as with most or most teams in general, you always have a variation in runtime, just due to RNG and damage variations and AI not doing what they're meant to do, etc. But I would say on average the runs are about 40 seconds if you average out a long period of runs. I would say the slowest run I've seen is probably just under a minute. But usually the runs are fall around the 40-something second range. This run was a bit slow, but I have definitely done much faster runs, of course. So a lot of it will depend on the Lucian's AI. Alright, you can see because he's notoriously known for not amping, on waves. So if he derps both his amps, amps on multiple waves, then that will slow down a run. Also, as with all teams, you rely on defense break, right? It's something that you can't really avoid. So, and no matter how much defense break you put into the team, you occasionally get sometimes where you just don't get a defense break. But this run was quite fast, as you can see. So things worked out fairly well in that run, from what I had noticed. Now let's show the runes real quick, and then I'll talk about the unit choices and stuff, and how to rune the units. Now I'll just show these runes just for a short period, and if you want to take a closer look at the runes, just go back and pause it. Should be plenty of time for you to pause it. I just don't want it to take too long to go through all the runes, or the rune, or the showcase of the runes at least. And you can see the stats as well once I go back to the, or once I show the normal screen, like so. For skill ups, I have 2 Talias are skilled up, and my Sabrina is skilled up. Now, you don't need them to be skilled up. It's nice if they are, obviously. Like all units, you're always gonna get better runs with skill ups, but they work perfectly fine without skill ups. Actually, when I first got my first pair of water twins, I wasn't even running multiple Talias at the time. I slotted them into my normal DB10 team, and it still sped up the run, and it was very consistent. I never failed. That was the most important thing. Okay, so those are the runes. Now, for runing wise, first thing to note is the speeds. So my Sabrina At this speed, she actually moves twice before the boss moves, from what I've noticed. Now, if you need to run your units such that you do 2 hits on the boss to kill it, because well, for me, my aim is to kill the boss in one rotation. So once all 4 of my twins have moved, the boss should have died. That's my goal. Obviously, it doesn't always happen because it relies on the defense breaking landing fairly early. But if you can't do that consistently, then build your team towards like 190, probably 195 plus speed for all your twins and or all your units in general. Maybe not. Maybe your Verd doesn't need to be if you're running Verd lead. But as long as the twins are around that speed, they'll attack twice before the immunity tower moves, and then before the boss moves as well. You should be able to tank 1 hit from the boss, and then even though the immunity will be up, you should have enough time to do another rotation and kill the boss before he attacks again. A second attack will probably wipe you, but 1 attack should be okay. To tank the boss, you actually don't need shield runes. It's actually probably worse to put shield runes on your team because it means you have less stats overall. Just because you're giving them a set that may not necessarily have the best substats. Like maybe a broken set could be better in terms of damage. Or if you're actually giving them a set, you're not really giving them stats to do more damage, right? So you're looking, if you're going to give them a proper set, you want to look for stuff that gives them benefit to the stats that they need. So for example, for Sabrina, you'll notice that I'm not putting her on rage or fate or any of those damage sets. I'm giving her focus. It still works just fine because I'm getting 40% accuracy from this. It means my actual substats don't need to have high accuracy to reach 55 accuracy, and that's roughly where you would like to get your accuracy to. If you're a little bit below or a little bit above, no big deal. Just get her around about this 50 something range. And after that, you want to get your crit rate to 85 because she's a water element, and that way she'll always crit the Zyros and the final boss. For the normal crystals, when she attacks them, even if she doesn't crit, you'll still kill the crystal because they have very low health, and because she's bringing along the boomerang as well, both their damage combined will easily one-shot the crystal. Now for her skills, she has defense break on skill 1, so that's the most important, and that's also why you only use 1 Sabrina. That way you can just ruin this 1 Sabrina on high accuracy, so you don't have to waste stats on a second Sabrina trying to get more accuracy on her as well, because that just means overall your team has less damage, right? So when the Talias attack, they'll always bring this Sabrina along, and that way every attack she makes always has high. She's always attacking with high accuracy chance to land a defense break. So she defense breaks the skill 1, and skill 2 she also defense breaks. So no matter what she does, she's always going to try the defense break, and that's very important. It's sort of why I don't like Galleon in this sort of team, and that's why you probably have noticed he's not even in the team. It's because Galleon only defense breaks on 2 out of 3 skills, right? So he has a chance to use skill 2 on turn 1, and that means the rest of your team has to attack without defense break and without attack power buff, right? So so overall he sort of reduces your average time because of that, right? You rely a lot on his AI, but for Sabrina, her AI is always going to do something that's going to defense break, and that's why I think she's very strong for this sort of speed team. Then just going back to Lucian, so Lucian would move first, right? If you're running Lucian. Now Lucian's kind of hard to run in DB10 because his rune requirements are quite high. So with my current runes, level 28 guild level, and max glory point buildings, and also I have 4 fight sets in this team. I don't quite one-shot the crystals on the mini boss stage, right? Because those mini boss crystals have more health than the normal trash waves. He'll always one shot if he amps on the normal trash waves, but it's very important to try to get your Lucian up, or his damage up enough, so that he can one shot the mini boss crystals as well. That way, if he does amp on that, he'll one shot that, and your twins will always target the Zyros, right? Now, if he derps and he uses skill 1 or skill 2 on the crystals, it doesn't matter, because he won't do enough damage without attack buff and without defense break to lower their health, it's enough. Because due to the AI, if the unit's on very low health and you're neutral to it, there's a good chance that your unit will switch to it with the automatic AI, right? So yeah, you can kind of avoid that with Lucian, even if he's on as high damage as possible. Now, for his speed, he has to be the fastest unit on the team, so you just make sure he's faster than your Sabrina. Obviously, there's a bit of a speed gap between my Lucian and my Sabrina. That's not too important. It's mainly because I'm running him in arena offense. But if I was building him specifically for DB10, then I would probably just drop his speed and try to give him more damage stats to make up for, or to like push him over the line to one shot those crystals, because I'm sort of like 50-50 on them at the moment. I'm hoping that with the guild lead, with the guild levels, I believe we have one more attack that we can gain. So with that extra 3% attack, I hope to be able to one shot them consistently. Otherwise, I might just drop his speed a little bit to give him a bit more attack or crit damage. For his sets, again, doesn't matter. Run whatever gives you the highest damage output for your cards, right? Just to give you an idea, I believe in Arena with Bernard lead, I do about 9.5k per card without like an Arena buff. To give you an idea of like how to compare to to see like whether yours will like do roughly enough damage, right? Now, if you don't have fight sets on your units, because I know most people probably don't, then you'll need to make up for it by having more damage on your Lucian, right? Obviously, the fight sets make it easier. Actually, I think I have 5 fight sets. No, sorry, it is 4 fight sets. So obviously, having more fight sets makes it easier to do more damage for your Lucian. But if you don't have good enough fight runes, don't bother, because you still need to make sure your twins, even though they're carrying fight runes, they need to do enough damage and have the correct stats that you need. Okay, next up we have Talia. So Talia is a pure damage dealer, alright? So first skill scales off when the enemy's HP total is low. Okay, think of it in a similar way to, say, maybe like an execute from World of Warcraft if you play that. But yeah, so if you've taken the boss down to, say, half health, she'll do more damage with her skill 1. And obviously she'll bring the boomerang along as well when she attacks. The second skill is a self-attack buff, and she instantly gains another turn after using it. So think of it similar to like Assassin's skill 2 and that sort of thing. And she removes harmful effects, which is sort of relevant, I guess, for the final boss stage if she gets dots on her. But you should kill the boss before that becomes relevant anyway. But the main important thing is this allows you to use attack buff twins for damage without having to rely on a Galleon being in the team, right? Or at all. So I save a slot, by doing that, because I don't have to run that Galleon. And in place of him, I put a high damage dealer, which is like an extra Talia, right? So Talia does self-attack buff. She will attack with a defense break because of the boomerang, and then the third ability is like a large nuke, which also scales when the boss is on half health or less. So she'll get another 50% damage with that. And also when the boomerang attacks along with her, when she does this, the boomerang will also gain the extra 50% damage, which is quite nice. And that's why Talia plus Sabrina does so much burst damage. and why they're quite notorious for that. So that's Talia. Also with her skills, none of them have any debuffs, right? So for that reason, you don't need to have any accuracy on your Talias at all, which is quite helpful. You just focus purely on damage. If you have some accuracy on it, it's not a big deal. Like, just use, if the rune has it, but it's still your highest damage rune, just use it. Actually, just going back to the Sabrina, so the other reason why the Water Twins do so much single target burst is, in addition to the Talia's third skill also getting so much damage for being below 50% health on the target, the Sabrina also does an extra 35% damage if there's no beneficial effects on the target. So with the dragon, he won't get his immunity up straight away, obviously, so therefore you'll get this passive for the first couple attacks, or 1 or 2 attacks depending on how you tune your team, and the effect of this is also transferred, or is also gained by the Talia that's attacking with your Sabrina. So you're adding that along with the Deadly Dance is 50%. That's a lot of single target burst damage they can dish out. Okay, so that's pretty much how to rune these units. Now let's discuss how the team works in DB10. Alright, so first off, I'll pause it to just to illustrate as well. So on the first wave, there's 4 crystals. Ideally, your Lucian will amp, right? If he doesn't amp, he'll either skill 1 or skill 2. Either way makes no difference, okay, to the rest of the turn order. So let's see what he does here. Okay, so he derps here, right? So then I have 4 twins to attack the crystals, right? And there's 4 targets. So I'll be able to one-shot each of them before any of them get to move, right? Because I'm obviously I'm faster than them. That's very important, because it means that I don't have to wait for the crystals attack animation, and because that wastes time, because I have to wait for the animation to go before my unit goes. And obviously the more crystals that are alive, the more I have to wait, obviously, right? So second wave, even easier. There's only 3 targets. He derps again, so I just have to wait for the twins to one-shot each one. Now, if you compare that to Shiner, if Shiner doesn't AoE, she should hopefully still one-shot the target anyway, along with the Sabrina that she's bringing along. If she AoEs, it may not necessarily kill all of them. Sometimes, well, I haven't tested it for a long time, but from my experience, you do need 2 Shiners to make it work, and then you're also relying on the Shiners, the AI, right? Now I'll talk about that in a bit more detail later, but that's just to give you an example of why the Water Twins pretty much just do the same thing as the Shiners for on average, especially if your Shiners can't one-shot those crystals. Now I haven't tested it for a long time, so I can't confirm, but you may need attack buff to make that work properly. And then obviously that's another layer of RNG that could screw up your time. Now Lucian derped again, so this is probably gonna be one of the slow runs, because he hasn't amped at all. So ideally, if he amps on the first wave, second wave obviously he doesn't have amp up, but on the third wave he'll have amp up again, and that means he could amp on wave 1 and wave 3, and that saves a bit of time. Or the better time saver would actually be for him to amp on either wave 1 or 2, and then skip this wave, right? He'll just do his skill 1 or whatever, and then your Boomerang, who's moving next, will target Zyros for sure, because Zyros is fire and the crystals are neutral, right? So being a water element, your Sabrina will always attack the Zyros, and hopefully defense break-in. That's obviously the goal. And once the defense break is landed, your next units can attack the Zyros for sure. So if you are running Shiner in the team, you should tune your Sabrina that way to move first, so that when Shiner moves, she'll only target the Zyros, right? And that way you don't waste time targeting the crystals, and that way you can go through the run quicker. But if you run all Water Twins, then they'll all attack the Zyros. I'll try to show like I'll try to do another run to see whether Lucian will amp. Now on this wave, obviously ideally it's good for Lucian to amp here, right? Because there's 5 targets, and if my twins move, then I might have to wait for one of the crystals to move, right? So let's see what he does. He does derp again, so no amp at all for this run, for this dragon's run. And that's probably like the worst case scenario, okay? Because because the whole point of bringing him is to amp a wave, and he didn't do that at all. So you can see here that's why there can be like 1 minute runs, and it's hard to really stop that. But I'll talk about that a little bit later as well. There's something else I need to mention for that. Now luckily that crystal was stunned, so he actually skipped his turn. He got stunned because of surprise box. There's a bit of randomness there. Obviously he's not always going to get stunned by surprise box, so yeah, that won't always be the case. Now on this one, so he actually amped here, which is kind of dumb, but it's like the thing with all bosses, or at least for dragons and giants, they have very high health, so even if you crit all your attacks, you actually don't really do that much damage to the boss. And that's why, generally speaking, Lucians are really bad for the boss, or any boss, including DB10. But the twins do so much damage that it kind of makes up for Lucian just doing basically nothing on this particular, part of the run. And obviously there's going to be 4 chances to land defense break on this first rotation, right? Now I didn't quite kill him because the defense break came quite late, so I have to wait for another rotation to hopefully kill him, and I should have enough damage. So if you can't kill him reliably within 1, then you should probably tune them to be faster, and that way you can probably get 2 turns instead. So he derps again here. I would like to just show a run where talk about a run where he actually amps. So hopefully he amps here. Actually, this is probably an ideal spot. So he does amp there. Then he will derp here because he doesn't have it up. He's not on cooldown. And you can notice that even though the crystals did get weakened, and the Zyros was like, he was still fairly high health as well. So the boomerang will target the Zyros still, and not switch to the crystals. It's mainly because surprise box has really low multiplier, so it's actually pretty bad. So that was actually a pretty good run so far. Pretty much everything's gone, the way I want it to go, and we should get a fairly fast run from this one. 31 seconds, pretty good. Okay, so obviously it's not consistent, but it can happen. And it will happen a decent amount of time, I would say. Okay, now let's talk about some alternative units that you can run. So first alternative unit would look like something like this. So you take Lucian out and put Verd in. Okay, this team works perfectly fine. In terms of average speed, it's actually pretty close to running Lucian anyway. But it's like you probably won't break like a super fast record with it, just because Verd doesn't help you clear the trash runs quicker. Alright, but it does make the whole run more consistent in that there's less like AI derping in the run. The other thing is it helps you boost your team's speed up in such a way that you can more easily get 2 hits on the boss before his immunity tower moves. So he can help you reduce the speed requirement on your runes by doing that. He can also further reduce it even more, but if he moves last, because he'll also boost your attack bar. So you should try to tune it in such a way that if he does his second skill, which only gives you 1 hit worth of his passive attack bar boost, right? If he uses his first skill, he uses this twice, so you'll get 40%. But you should try to tune it towards having 20%. So you should test it out. I'm not sure how I can give you like an exact way to calculate it, but best way is really just to try it and see, what happens and whether you need to boost your speed a little bit more on your units or not. For Verd, if you're running him, put him on non-violent and make him move last, alright? Because you don't want him to move first because it kind of wastes the attack bar boost It's better to make him move second. That way, makes the twins move a lot quicker, right? Because they should be getting pretty much 20 or 40% all the time. Whereas if you make Vern move first, unless he's like significantly faster than the twins, they actually won't really gain that much attack bar because they're already fairly close in attack bar like totals by then. Now next up, if you don't have multiple Talias, what you can do is take those out, and the first thing I would swap in is Stella. Okay, now Stella, you build her very typical like fashion, high accuracy, damage, 85 crit rate, right? Standard sort of water nuker with a bit of accuracy. Use whatever runes that you need to get her to the speed that you require, which should be a total speed of including speed tower and speed lead of 225. So at 225 combat speed, she gets her 7 hits on 3rd skill. So if you're running Verd lead, she actually doesn't need to be that fast. But if you're using her in other areas, such as like Fire Rift or something, then you probably tune it towards having no lead, okay, and just only include your speed tower. Now, if you have max speed tower, then if you get her to roughly 210 total speed, then you'll get enough to get your 7 hits. Okay. Now, if you have to make Stella that fast, then obviously your Sabrina should move before that. So she'll have to be a little bit faster than your Stella. Then finally, if you don't have anything fancy like tail or anything like that as to put in the last slot, then the easiest option to get or to swap in would be a Tark, right? He's like the final, like, the final sort of last resort backup, right? Because the thing with Tark is he does do pretty decent single target damage because second skill is speed scaling, third skill brings another 2 units to attack. But when he brings your twins to attack, they actually don't bring each other to attack. The twins only bring each other along on their own turns when they attack, and not on like group attacks like group hunt or like revenge procs. So I mean, it still help because he'll have a chance to bring your Sabrina along and help defense break that way. But it's just not like 100%, you know, like it's not the best. But and also his base attack is not like crazy high either. And just in general, having an extra twin is just much better, like, in terms of single target burst damage. But yeah, he can be used if you have absolutely nothing else. The only true requirement I would say you have to have would be the water twins, especially Sabrina. You can actually get away without Talia, but your runs probably won't be as fast. But Sabrina is the most important because none of the other twins do what she does, right? Which is buffs damage passively with this. No one else is water elements, so they won't target the Zyros for sure. And that's very important on the mini boss, because if you run neutral element units and the defense breaks the crystals, then you're wasting time hitting those crystals instead of the Zyros, and that will slow down your run. Okay, so you can run those as an alternative. If you don't have Verd, I know some people, well, at least like newer players who are starting, from now onwards, you may not necessarily have Verd because he's a nat 4. So if you don't have Verd, then the other option would be to run Susano. Okay, I have not actually tried this, but I know other people who have used Susano in just normal non-twin teams, and it works perfectly fine. And I think in theory it will still work perfectly fine in this sort of team. Functionally, he still gives you speed lead like Verd would. So if you need the speed, then Susano is good for that. The downside would be he doesn't give you attack bar like Verd does, but as long as your units are fairly fast already, you probably don't need that much more speed. Like, even if you're running attack slot too, because with 30% speed lead, it reduces your rune requirement quite a lot. You could probably get away with, like, let's say 165 total speed, and you should get 2 hits before the boss moves. Now, the other way the other thing is, if you're ruining him, just ignore my runes. He's not actually built properly for anything. But if you do run him, rune him on attack crit damage attack, because he has like an insane amount of attack, base attack. 911 is quite a lot, especially for Nat 4. So he scales really well with attack slot 2 and a fatal set ideally. And make him move last on your team, because you don't want him to move early, because if he moves early there may not be a defense break and that will waste a turn. But if he moves last, then you have a pretty good chance that there'll be a defense break on the unit from the other 4 twins, and well, I guess it would mainly be relevant for the boss, because he will only really be hitting that. But there'll be a defense break there for him to hit, and he does pretty good single target damage, because not only does he have really high base attack, but he also scales of speed for both his abilities. So once you add in his speed lead, he'll still be like 190 something speed after your twins, right? So he'll hit really hard, and I guess in a way he's sort of like a more damaged version of Third. Or at least that's how I describe him. Alright, so those are the alternative units. Now let's talk about why Shiner is not particularly good for DB10. Now I can't actually show you why, because my Shiners are built for Necro, so they're not exactly like tuned properly for this. They'll be too slow. But for one, for the trash phase, right? If your Sabrina AoEs, you need her to be able to one-shot these crystals to make her worth the slot. I don't remember whether it's possible to get her with enough damage without a Galleon or a Kali, but ideally you would try not to run Kali or Galleon if possible. If you're trying to get the fastest possible run, at least. The reason for that is because no matter which of those you use, they're gonna waste a turn doing attack buff. And if you rely on that, well, then what happens when you don't have the attack buff? It means you're not one-shotting the crystals anyway, and you have to use another attack to finish off those crystals as well. So that's why if you do run Shiner, you probably need to run double Shiner. That way you have a chance to use double AoE to clear it, right? But the problem with that would be you're relying on the AI working perfectly on and also like adding in all the other like AI problems that you would have with other units such as Lucian. So for that reason, I generally don't like Shiner for trash waves in DB10. Okay, so whereas with the Water Twins, you always know what they're going to do. They're always going to single target down each of these 3 units, and maybe with Shiner you could possibly skip like one attack animation if you use double AoE, obviously, or maybe like a couple, or maybe like 2 on like the trash waves with more units. But I think overall, like it doesn't really make it that much better. And also the other thing with Shiner is she's a fire unit, so therefore if you want consistent damage, then you need to make them 100% crit rate. I know a lot of people run her with less crit rate, but you have to think about it. You're not always going to crit, and you rely on critting to get your burst damage, because otherwise you're just wasting all that crit damage stats when you're not critting, and therefore that will overall slow down your run. Maybe occasionally you'll get a record time, but it won't happen that often, because it's just another layer of RNG. You're relying on it critting at the correct time. So to avoid that, you would have to have better runes on your Shiners to make them equally as effective. Actually, sorry. The other thing I want to talk about for Shiner is on this mini boss stage. Ideally for Shiner, theoretically you should be making her move first, because she's an AoE defense breaker, right? And that's due to her passive, and the passive is whenever she attacks a unit, she will apply a 1-turn defense break, and that is like it synergizes with a skill 2, which is an AoE attack. So if she AoEs on this stage, right, and she's moving first, then there's a chance she'll defense break the crystals, right, and not defense break the Zyros. And then the other thing that can happen is she'll target the crystals because she's neutral element to all units on this stage, right? So there's a chance that she'll target the crystal, and that will bring the boomerang to attack that crystal too. And if you don't one-shot it, which is quite possible due to the crystals having very high health. If you have attack buff, yeah, you one-shot it. But if you don't have attack buff, then you might not. And if that happens, the crystal will be on very low health and very likely defense broken, because there's two chances to defense break between your Sabrina and your Shiner. And that would mean that the next unit that moves, even if it's water, there's a chance that the water unit will attack the defense broken crystal, even if Zyros is defense broken, just because Zyros is very likely to still have a decent amount of health, whereas the crystal is on, like, it's almost dead. So, like, generally speaking, the AI has a chance to switch to a almost dead unit if it's neutral, or at least neutral to your unit. And of course, like I said many times throughout the video, that will slow down your run because you're wasting an attack animation to attack the crystal instead of attacking the dragon, or Zyros, I should say. Now, one more thing to talk about for Shiner is, one of the things that people like about Shiner is that her passive also reduces the attack bar of anyone she hits, and also the boomerang will also have that effect when she attacks too. And obviously you're targeting, so what will happen is you're targeting the dragon boss, Shiner will attack. If you use skill 1, all well and good, you have 2 chances to attack, to lower the attack bar on your dragon. Generally speaking, you shouldn't need that to happen. You should be able to kill the boss within 2 rotations. If you can't kill it within 2 rotations of twin attacks, then you're probably not ready for a speed DB10. It's probably not worth your while to actually do a speed DB10. You're probably better off just doing a normal team for consistency and just not failing at all. Because if you fail a run, it reduces your average time because you're just wasting like a minute, right? Or a minute plus. And then for the AoE, people like it because when she AoE, she can reduce the attack bar on the immunity, and thereby give the immunity tower, and thereby giving you more time to attack the boss down. Now, problem with that is the tower on the right has very high resist. I'm not sure if people have ever noticed, but for the very old school original teams for beginners, usually people would suggest using Beretta, and I do remember when I used to use Beretta when I first started the game for DB10, and the right tower, even though I'm targeting it with Veramos as well, and like stacking all my dot units, right? Veramos, Megan, and then the Beretta dots. The left tower will always die first because that one seems to have very low resist and eats all the dots, even from just having Beretta there. And then the right tower just never dies until the first tower's already dead. The left tower's already dead, and yeah. So it's just much harder to kill. It's much harder to land anything on the right tower. So if you rely on that to get through your runs, then it's not reliable, right? You don't want to rely on things like that to get you through Deep Dragon Speed 10 because it just ruins your consistency. Okay, now another thing that people will probably have noticed is that none of these twins are on Violent. Quite simply, you just don't need Violent to do this, and doing a Violent proc kind of actually just wastes turns in a way, because if you think about it, with Violent, so just looking at the stats, right? With Violent, you're generally going to have to give them weaker quality runes, because by the time you get to your twins, after you've done all your PvP units, because people who are doing speed DB10 are probably more PvP focused, right? So you prioritize your PvP units. All your best Violent attacker type runes are probably going to be used already. So by the time you get to your twins, you're going to have to give them like the very spare, low quality runes, and you just won't have much attack, right? Then on her normal attacks without Violent proc, she'll be doing less damage, obviously, because lower stats. And then if you're relying on the Violent proc to do your burst damage, then having a Violent proc means you probably get more damage than like a normal, like a pure damage twin using one attack, right? But your violent unit has to use 2 attack animations to get that damage, right? And then the rest of the time, you're just doing weaker attacks and only attacking once anyway. So you basically want to make every second as efficient as possible. So to do that, you want to have as much damage as possible on your units. So using runes that give you more damage stats, or just using broken sets that are higher damage, higher quality in terms of damage, is just plain better. Okay, so that's why I don't use violent on any of these twins, and yeah, it works pretty well. Okay, so that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about. But if there's any questions, anything I may have missed, feel free to ask me in comments, and I'll try to answer that as soon as I can. I do plan to do some more videos for other content using twins, if I can figure out like the teams that I want to use for it. I would say the next one would probably be Necro B10, just because I'm probably in terms of like finding my optimal team, I think I'm closest to finding that one as opposed to Giants. So that will probably be next, but I'm not sure exactly when I'll actually make that video. So yeah, maybe within like the next couple months, we'll see. But once I've found the team and I'm happy with it, I'll showcase that one. And yeah, I believe that's it. So thanks again for watching, guys, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.